Welcome back to On the Hunt at FoxNews.com live. Time for my favourite part of every week, the hit list. Bill Daly and Tom Ruskin in the house today, and between them, my beautiful new graphic, On the Hunt. Look at that. Isn't that fabulous? Do you like it? Do you like the way it turns?
The omnipresent.
I like the way it rotates back and forth with the dark
its eyes on you. Omnipresent, Jonathan Hunt.
That's me.
Right, from
just
behind
beware of that. Everywhere you go, Bill Daly, because somebody needs to have their eye on you. All right, talking of eyes on things, this awful story right here in the city, and it's got national attention just because it was so horrific. Middle-aged man in his 50s pushed off a subway platform into the path of an oncoming train, and on top of that, people there, including a freelance photographer for our sister publication, the New York Post, taking a photograph. First of all, Bill, before we get to the ethics of that, the incident itself, I mean, there are cops, there's a lot of cops down in the subway all the time, but there's nothing you can do to prevent one crazy guy doing something like this, I guess. No,
unfortunately not. I mean, as we know, the subway platforms get extremely crowded and very tight, and some people do take a chance on standing close beyond the yellow marker that keeps you a certain distance away. You can never be sure who's around. I always, even to my family, kind of stand away and look almost behind you at who's on the platform. Unfortunately, these things have occurred in the past. They're tragedies. And I think right now some of the questions being raised is, after the man went down the tracks, how long was he there, and could have someone gone down? But I don't want to talk negatively, because there have been so many very, very heroic stories here in New York where people have gone down onto the tracks, where people have fallen off, where people have had heart attacks, or people had gone unconscious and fell onto the tracks. They went down and got him. So I don't want to be in any way kind of negative as to what happened in this case, but it is a very tragic one. And for our viewers out there who come and visit New York, this is certainly an anomaly. This does not happen all the time.
Which I guess is one of the reasons we talk about it, because it's so out of left field. But Tom, you've seen the best and worst of New York during your life. This was the worst of New York in the way that it happened. Cops like you guys, you go towards trouble all the time. You try to help people, but the instinct on this platform does not appear to have been, let's get this guy out of there. There was no rush to help him, and there was more than one person on that platform. It wasn't just a photographer taking pictures.
Let's set the scenario. This is Midtown Manhattan. It's a couple blocks from here. It was my first precinct that I ever worked. It's Midtown North. So basically, you always have it crowded. For some reason, after this argument, and it wasn't just a haphazard push, they were arguing with each other. I don't know if they knew each other as of yet, but they were having an argument, and the argument led to this man being pushed onto the tracks. With that said, normally if people are going to rescue, they go in a group. And I think that people naturally fear the idea of reaching down as a train's coming and potentially being pulled on by this man who's frantic at that point in time onto the train tracks. All I can tell you is, along Bill's point, this is not normal in New York City. This happened out of an argument. This wasn't someone standing by the side of the tracks being pushed. And there also is a cavity in the center of the tracks that, not to second guess this gentleman, but that if he had laid,
if you lay down,
you stay flat, as fearful as you are, as the train comes over, you have a chance of escaping.
In fact, last year we had someone who jumped on the tracks, went and laid on top of someone in that little recess between the tracks, and was able to protect that individual with his own life, and neither of them got hurt. So it is that.
And the motorman, I mean, the trauma that the motorman must feel. He tried to throw on the emergency brakes. It doesn't stop that quickly. And to think that he witnessed his train hitting the man, he will never be the same.
He's already had some treatment for the shock of this, and that's one can imagine something that lives with you forever. And I think it's also worth saying that none of us, I mean, you guys do because you're trained, but none of us ordinary human beings knows how we would react in that situation. You just you just don't know. So it's easy to sit here and criticize somebody for not doing something, but you have no idea. If you're not trained for it, you have no idea.
You can't criticize. It's a split-second decision. Yeah. The trains come in at a very fast pace. They're on a very fast schedule, so they come in very quickly. We don't know how close the post-freelance photographer was. He says he was further away. We don't know if he was using a zoom lens to shoot that gory photo minutes before this man was shot, run over. But you don't know how you're going to react. And I have seen people in my days, I'm sure Bill has seen, react differently to different stress situations.
Yeah, and I would probably say it's one of those situations that even for law enforcement and those people who, who are trained to a certain degree, but certainly not trained in every one of these emergencies, it's going to be a personal decision, and they're going to be able to say, can I help that person? Either I or other people are going to be endangered by helping them, and it is a very personal one. That's why in the past we've seen people take those heroic steps and go down and save people, reach down, pull people up, a number of different things. Again, very tragic situation, and unfortunately, at this time of year, for those that family who now has to.
But as an epilogue, the good news is the police have found the person who did it.
Quickly.
Exactly.
Very quickly, the alleged person who did it. They have him. They're questioning him. He has given statements from what the press is reporting, tying himself to the crime, and now they're just tying their case together with lineups now. So the good news is within 24 hours they have the person who did it.
Which is always good news, that's for sure. All right, let's get to another story that's been getting a lot of attention at foxnews.com, which is the George Zimmerman case. Not a name we've talked about a lot recently. George Zimmerman, obviously the neighborhood watchman who shot Trayvon Martin to death down in Florida. He said he did it in self-defense. Trayvon Martin obviously can't give us his side of the story. We've seen these new photos. We just put them up on screen there. Color photos of what are apparently injuries suffered by George Zimmerman in the wake of the confrontation between him and Trayvon Martin. As an investigator, Bill, does this tell you anything? Does it take us forward?
Well, it certainly, I think, it certainly is further enlightening. I think there were pictures of this apparently released that were in black and white, that were in high-resolution color, and that's, I think, one of the issues that the defense is taking, the fact that they didn't get the original photos from the prosecution early enough. At the end of the day, though, I mean, I think from an investigative standpoint, it just tells you that an altercation took place, but it doesn't really tell you more about, why someone was shot, how the encounter actually took place. But it does suggest that there was a physical confrontation, that it wasn't Zimmerman standing aside, that he was actually, perhaps wrestling on the ground, as he suggests, that he was having his head pushed into the sidewalk and he has a bloodied nose, etc., and cuts on his head, I believe. I think what we're seeing here, though, Jonathan, is a bit of, and I'm going to speak not as a lawyer, but as one who talks like one on TV and shows like this,
one on TV.
Is really kind of a stagemanship, is that, yes, the defense had a copy of this picture. It's not going to really change the either the charges or anything else that occurred. What it's going to do is it's going to impact the jury. And so what they're hoping to do is, I believe, by getting this out here, and even people who are seeing it now, is that may in some way influence a jury pool to the fact that there was this altercation, that it wasn't George Zimmerman acting in kind of a standoff mode and he took his gun out and shot Trayvon Martin. Is that I think at the end of the day, it comes down to how the jury is selected. It's going to be how this impacts the jury. And from an investigative standpoint, I think it doesn't add too much more than we already know.
Tom, it was always going to be a pretty difficult case to prove, isn't it, given that there's only one side who can actually tell the story?
And the fact that Zimmerman now has substantial injuries. I mean, we're not talking about just a bloody nose. We're talking about a laceration to the head. We're talking about a bloody nose, possibly broken nose, and blood all over his face. These photos show to me that there was definitely a fight. He definitely may have been defending himself, and the stand your ground law may come into play, and the charges may be dismissed by the judge.
All right. Okay. Tom Ruskin, Bill Daly, thank you very much. And as you leave here, remember that I'll be watching.
We'll be saluting.
Right there.
I'll be right there. I've got my eye on you two dodgy gentlemen. All right, great to see you both. Thanks very much for being here.